Israeli strikes on Lebanon's Bekaa Valley overnight killed dozens of people, local authorities said on Tuesday. It's the area's deadliest day yet in more than a year of hostilities, and comes as the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah announced a new leader. Buildings were seen leveled to the ground on Tuesday. The area's governor said there had been nearly 70 deaths, but said the final toll was set to rise as rescue workers dug through the rubble for people buried underneath. No evacuation orders were given for the dozens of towns struck overnight. There was no immediate comment from Israel on the attacks. Large swathes of the Bekaa Valley in the country's east are Hezbollah strongholds. Israel has ramped up its airstrikes across Lebanon over the last month. Plumes of smoke could be seen from the southern city of Marjayoun on Tuesday, as Israeli strikes hit the outskirts of a border village. Its military says it is targeting Iran-backed Hezbollah. Lebanese officials, rights groups and residents of affected towns say the strikes are indiscriminate. On Tuesday, Hezbollah said its Shura Council had elected Deputy Head Naim Qassem as its new leader. The 71-year-old replaces Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed in an Israeli strike late September. Qassem had been deputy chief since 1991 and had long been one of Hezbollah's leading spokesmen, though he is considered by many in Lebanon to lack the charisma and gravitas of Nasrallah. Since Nasrallah's killing, Qassem has said in a televised address that the armed group supports efforts to reach a ceasefire for Lebanon.
What impact will Israel's ban on UNRWA have on Gaza? The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees employs thousands of people who run the enclave's schools, its primary healthcare clinics and other social services, as well as distributing humanitarian aid. Israeli lawmakers on Monday banned the agency from operating within Israel. The move raises concerns about UNRWA's ability to provide relief in Gaza and has alarmed Western allies who fund it. Since Israel launched its war following the October 7 attacks in 2023, nearly the entire Gazan population now relies on UNRWA for basics including food, water and hygiene supplies. Other UN agencies say the humanitarian system in Gaza would likely collapse without UNRWA, as they'd be unable to distribute life-saving supplies. Here's UNICEF spokesperson James Elder.
So a decision such as this suddenly means that a new way has been found to kill children.
The World Health Organization's Tarek Jasarevic says around 3,000 UNRWA health workers have also provided medical consultations for more than half the enclave's population.
It's really unmatched. It couldn't be matched by any agency.
The UN said in August that 9 UNRWA staff may have been involved in the October 7 attacks and fired them. Israeli authorities have long called for the agency to be dismantled, arguing it fosters anti-Israeli sentiment among its staff and in its wider social mission. UNRWA strongly disputes this characterization.
Palestinians carried the wrapped bodies of victims after an Israeli missile strike on Tuesday shattered a 4-story building in Beit Lahia in the northern Gaza Strip. A warning, this video contains graphic images. Gaza's health ministry said the building was packed with members of the extended Abu Nasser family, along with others displaced by the fighting. Ismail Ouaida said he was an eyewitness to the attack.
The house of the Abu Nasser family in Beit Lahia's project neighborhood was bombed. It's formed of 4 floors. There are tens of martyrs. Tens of displaced people were living in this house. The house was bombed without prior warning. As you can see, martyrs here and there with body parts hanging on the walls. The neighbours and everything in Beit Lahia, residents of Beit Lahia.
The health ministry said at least 93 people were dead or missing, and that 20 of those killed were children. There was no immediate Israeli military comment. Beit Lahia is among the northern Gaza towns and refugee camps ravaged by a new Israeli air and ground assault Palestinian medics say has killed around 900 people. The Israeli military has said the operations aim to prevent a revival of Hamas in the area after more than a year of bloody conflict. The war was sparked when Hamas-led militants killed around 1,200 people in a rampage across southern Israeli communities and took over 250 hostages on October 7, 2023, according to Israeli tallies. Israel has vowed no end to the war until it wipes out Hamas as a military force and governing entity in Gaza. Gaza's health ministry says the death toll from Israel's air and ground offensive has exceeded 43,000. Worries over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsened after Israel on Monday passed a law banning the United Nations agency known as UNRWA that coordinates relief for Palestinians in the occupied territories.
If UNRWA is unable to operate, it'd likely see the collapse of the humanitarian system in Gaza.
James Elder, a spokesperson for UNICEF, told reporters on Tuesday the decision would lead to more avoidable deaths.
So a decision such as this suddenly means that a new way has been found to kill children.
Israel said the move against UNRWA was due to what it said was evidence employees of the agency had aided and participated in the October 7th attack last year.
With Election Day now less than a week away, former U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday sought to distance himself from racist comments made at his New York rally on Sunday, while Vice President Kamala Harris held the biggest rally of her presidential run to date. More than 75,000 people gathered Tuesday evening for Harris's rally in Washington, D.C., according to an estimate by her campaign. She spoke from the same spot where Trump addressed his supporters before they attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Look, we know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election.
Harris went on to contrast her vision of leadership with what she described as Trump's.
On day one, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list, full of priorities of what I will get done for the American people.
Meanwhile, Trump on Tuesday appeared keen to move on from the controversy surrounding his New York City rally on Sunday.
There's literally a floating island of garbage,
where a comedian called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage and peddled other racist tropes about Latinos and other minority groups. In Florida earlier in the day, Trump praised that event and said he was honored to be involved.
It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest.
The Trump campaign has said the joke did not reflect its views, though the candidate himself has not directly commented on the remarks. Later on Tuesday, Trump flew to Pennsylvania, the biggest prize among the 7 battleground states that will decide the outcome of the November 5th election. Puerto Ricans are the largest Hispanic group in the state, according to data from the U.S. Census Bureau. At a roundtable in Drexel Hill, Trump touted his record.
I think no president's done more for Puerto Rico than I have.
Trump repeated the line later on at a rally in the heavily Hispanic city of Allentown.
Nobody loves our Latino community and our Puerto Rican community more than I do. Nobody. You know, it's interesting because I've done more for Puerto Rico than any president by far.
Harris has led Trump in every Reuters Ipsos poll since she entered the race in July, but her advantage has steadily shrunk since late September. As the candidates near the finish line, a Reuters Ipsos poll on Tuesday showed that Harris's lead has eroded to just 44 to 43% among registered voters.
This was the scene outside the vote-counting hall at the TCF Center in downtown Detroit, one day after the 2020 election. This was 2 days after the election, when supporters of then-President Donald Trump sought to disrupt the vote-counting process.
That whole experience resonates with every Detroiter.
Daniel Baxter, Detroit's chief operating officer for absentee voting and special projects at the Department of Elections, says the entire city is preparing for a potential repeat of the unrest from 4 years ago.
All 635,000 of us are concerned about this election, and we just want to make sure that we have planned for the worst as we hope for the best.
Detroit, one of Trump's favorite targets for false claims of voter fraud, has fortified election offices and voting centers ahead of this year's election. Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey explains.
We've replaced all of our first floor windows with bulletproof windows. We have updated our security camera system. We have updated the number of security plainclothes as well as uniformed. And we're just making sure that we're all safe.
As opinion polls show Trump and Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris neck and neck heading into the November 5th vote, officials say there's one thing they can't predict or control: what Trump and his allies might say on election night as the votes are still being counted.
Just take a look at Detroit.
But Winfrey, who is a Democrat, says she will not be intimidated by the Republican former president.
I think he's the type of person that thinks that he can easily intimidate Detroiters because we're a predominantly black city. But we're not intimidated by him at all. And I think we proved that in 2020 when they tried to intimidate Detroiters.
In 2022, Michigan passed a law allowing for pre-processing of mail-in ballots. Election workers in Detroit now have 8 days to verify and tabulate absentee ballots prior to Election Day. Winfrey said she hopes to report results in time for the 11 p.m. TV news on November 5th.
I'm very confident in that process. But I am concerned and hopeful that our country will accept whatever the outcome of this election is in a peaceful and a unified manner.
I feel like the election is a free and fair process.
As the key battleground state of Georgia experiences record turnout in early voting ahead of next week's presidential election, voters in Gwinnett County like Kelly Chambers expressed their trust in the election process.
For those who vote, who take the time to read the ballots and actually, go and do their civic duty, there's no problem. There shouldn't be any problem. However, like I said, losers cry the loudest.
The loser she is referring to is the current Republican candidate for the White House, Donald Trump, who lost Georgia in a 2020 upset to his Democratic rival, Joe Biden. After that, Trump sought unsuccessfully to overturn his defeat in the state, citing false claims of mail ballot fraud. But what Trump did then hasn't deterred some in Georgia from wanting the former president back in the Oval Office.
I know he's a little arrogant, but I feel like from what he did for over 4 years ago, the economy was better. It stinks as far as I'm concerned.
He fight for this country. That's how I like. He put his heart into it. He fight for the country. He fight for the people in the United States.
Meanwhile, Trump still won't admit that he lost the 2020 election and has refused to commit to accepting the results this year. With 8.2 million registered voters, Georgia is crucial in the race between Trump and his Democratic rival this time, Kamala Harris, a contest most recent polls show to be extremely close.
This bus is loading up with migrants at a Mexican checkpoint near the U.S. border. A source says it's heading south, though its destination could not be independently confirmed. The dimly lit video captured by a Reuters reporter offers a glimpse into Mexico's largest ever migration crackdown. The idea? Move migrants south, throw up administrative hurdles, implement widespread detentions. That's according to public data and conversations with a dozen officials on both sides of the border. 5 Mexican officials said the aim is to wear down migrants, so they give up before reaching the U.S. Immigration has been a key issue in the run-up to the U.S. presidential election on November 5th.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
Polls show voters trust Republican candidate Donald Trump more on the issue of immigration than his Democratic rival, Kamala Harris.
Our system must be orderly and secure.
Partly as a result of Mexico's efforts, the number of migrants caught by U.S. authorities at the border in recent months has fallen sharply to the lowest level since 2020. One expert at George Mason University said a border that looks out of control fuels Donald Trump, and that Mexico's crackdown helps the Biden administration dampen that view. Some of the migrants end up here, a shelter in Mexico's southern Tabasco state. Venezuelan migrant Jose Diaz says he spent 3 straight days on a bus, traveling 2,000 miles with no stops, although the bus had a bathroom, he says. Previously unreported data show Mexico is on track to bus a third more migrants to its southern states this year. Its government rarely talks about the program publicly. The country's foreign ministry says the goal is not to exhaust migrants, it's to protect them from human traffickers. The head of a unit at Mexico's public defender's office says busing is a, quote, illegal practice. Here's the director of the International Rescue Committee, Rafael Velasquez.
Mexico is the last mile for Afghans, Senegalese, for people from Syria. Here you can see people from Haiti, people from all over the world. This is where they come. This is where they end up. This is where they are. This is the corral where many of these situations happen. This carousel is not solving that problem. It is simply shifting it a bit from one area to another.
Officials who spoke to Reuters asked not to be named, as the measures contrast with Mexico's stated humanitarian migration policy. The crackdown is now in its 10th month. Mexican officials say it followed pressure from the U.S. That included the temporary closure in December of several trade routes into Mexico, which cost Mexican companies an estimated $100 million per day in lost trade, according to one business lobby. The pressure also included more direct requests from the U.S., including a phone call from President Joe Biden to then Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Newly inaugurated Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said she will work closely with whoever wins in November.
Va a haber una buena relación.
There have been efforts on the U.S. side, too. In June, the Biden administration implemented a broad asylum ban, which U.S. officials have said contributed to bringing down U.S. apprehensions.
The number of migrants coming and to our shared border unlawfully in recent months has dropped dramatically.
But one expert said Mexico's effort has been, quote, absolutely crucial. Harris has pointed to the U.S. numbers to argue in her campaign that the Biden administration has been tough on border issues. While Trump has increasingly used darker and more violent language about immigrants, Mexico itself has been less of a target than in 2016. One senior Mexican official said that's the whole point, to not be the focus in this year's election. Mexico's foreign ministry said its migration strategy is not linked to the election.
Rescue teams search for survivors in the rubble of a building in Argentina on Tuesday, after the 10-story hotel collapsed early that day, alarming neighbors.
Honestly, it was shocking to see how the building collapsed. It transformed into a cloud of dust and we couldn't see anything. We heard like an earthquake, as some neighbors said. This was terrible. It's like a horror movie we are living through.
A statement from the municipality of the coastal city of Villa Gesell said between 7 and 9 people were believed to be inside at the time. They included workers from a construction site, allegedly operating without municipal permits. City Mayor Gustavo Barrera visited the site later that day.
There was a closed-down construction area. An elevator shaft was being worked on, and it remains intact here at the front of the building. We think there has been irregular work at the rear side where the tower was.
The province's Minister of Security said survivors could live under the rubble for up to a week, and that rescue teams would not leave until they had removed the last stone. Authorities said an 80-year-old woman was rescued with the help of a probe-equipped camera, and that the body of an elderly man was recovered. The cause of the collapse has not been disclosed, but officials said 4 people linked to the construction at the site have been arrested.
Ali Haider Ahmed's life was turned upside down when Israel launched its offensive in Lebanon in September. Previously working at a lumber mill, he now makes his living helping tens of thousands of refugees cross from Lebanon into Syria. He lives out of his car at the Al-Masnar border. And from dawn until nightfall, he drives back and forth between the two countries, transporting refugees across a short but treacherous stretch, which spans just over a mile.
I don't feel safe at all, because we work while constantly worried about when the plane will strike and at what time they will hit us. We are always worried, and our families are displaced in Syria. We just want this situation to end, and so we can rest and live in our homes.
Earlier this month, strikes put the main Masnar crossing temporarily out of service. It's left Lebanon's northern border crossing as the only open route into Syria. Despite the risks, Ali continued his work.
I have to work so I can provide for my family. I have to work. If I don't work, I won't be able to eat. And here we fill a tank of petrol at $30. It barely makes its cost back.
Israel launched its major offensive in Lebanon a month ago. It said it was targeting the heavily armed Iran-backed Hezbollah group to secure the return home of tens of thousands of Israelis evacuated from the north due to cross-border attacks. Beirut authorities say Israel's Lebanon offensive has killed more than 2,500 people and displaced more than 1.2 million. sparking a humanitarian crisis.